The story begins with a teenage girl, Elizabeth, walking towards her home. Upon reaching the house, she gets frustrated when she finds mud. She thinks it's due to her father's muddy boots, but when she approaches the fridge, she finds a note, which states that her dad had to go to Kansas City, and he wants her to take care of her little brother Bob in his absence. Elizabeth hears footsteps from above and quietly starts climbing the stairs, calling out for little Bob, but no one answers. She then enters his room and finds the TV on, a cereal bowl left uneaten, and no one is inside. Paranoia hits Elizabeth, and she quickly picks up the shotgun from her father's room. To avoid making a noise, Elizabeth removes her shoes. She hears the footsteps again and climbs down the stairs, shouting for little Bob to stop hiding and come out. Yet again, she receives no answer. Elizabeth goes out through the back door and spots a silhouette in the woods. However, in the blink of an eye, it vanishes. Elizabeth runs towards the woods but falls and hurts her head. She cries in pain and hears a kid's voice resonating through the forest begging for help. Simultaneously, in Westlake, everyone is preparing for an annual festival. The story then focuses on two brothers, Killian and Crawford. The elder Crawford is in school taking his class while Killian is on a morning run with his class fellows. Killian's friend gets tired, and they stop for a while, but the school bullies come and start a fight, during which Killian falls and hurts his forehead. On the other side, their Aunt Layla visits the municipal building for some taxes. The woman there greets her and asks about Crawford's mother's health, and Layla tells her she is improving. While Layla is busy talking, another man tells them the annual fair may get cancelled because of a peculiar incident that happened, leaving Layla and the woman curious. Back in school, they suddenly make an announcement asking everyone to leave, and students start to pack their bags. The brothers meet outside, and Crawford asks Killian if he has any idea why they got a sudden leave. Killian shows him a picture of Elizabeth in the newspaper and informs him that another kid has gone missing, so they are shutting down all the schools in the town for safety. Crawford notices the mark on his forehead and questions Killian about it. Killian goes quiet, but Crawford realizes who did it. He goes to the bully and punches him in the face. Layla comes to pick up the boys, and Crawford has to stop himself from throwing another punch. They get in the car, and Layla drives them home. Layla starts to prepare lunch for them, and as Crawford and Killian wait at the table, Crawford tells Killian that his friends have gathered beers and firecrackers and are planning to go to a forest for a party. Killian reveals his fear of being caught due to the town's current situation and curfew, but Crawford reassures him they are going very far from the city. Later, as Layla leaves with her husband, Crawford gets ready while Killian watches the news on TV about Elizabeth and Bob. The news reporters relate it to the previous missing case of another young boy. They then invite a farmer named Nathan on TV, who claims he saw a scary figure in the woods that vanished within the blink of an eye and never showed up again. The reporter adds that this can lead to the current scenario of farmers complaining about the mutilation and disappearance of their animals. Killian then follows Crawford out of the house and rides towards the forest. Parking their bike at a distance, the brothers run towards the woods and reach the designated spot for the meetup. However, Crawford's friends neither show up nor reply to his calls through the radio walkie-talkie. Crawford calls them and realizes there is a network outage. He then uses the walkie-talkie, but no one answers. It starts to get dark, and Crawford suggests they can enjoy themselves alone. He lights up a firecracker in the sky, and upon looking up, they notice a treehouse. Crawford climbs to the house, and Killian reluctantly follows him. Once at top, Crawford starts to look around with the help of a torch and finds a magazine lying on the floor. He picks it up and gets blood on his hand. Crawford looks up terrified and realizes someone is there. Upon going up close, they realize it is Elizabeth, the missing girl in the newspaper, and sit near her. Crawford offers her a can of soda, and as she drinks, he looks at her wounds. He then asks her about Bob, so she tells them that the hunters took him. However, she escaped and has been in this treehouse for over a day. She tells Crawford about her hypoglycemia and asks for another soda. Crawford gives her one and tries to call the police, but the call fails. They ponder for a while, and then Crawford decides that Killian and he can return to the town and bring the cops here. However, Killian tells him that they shouldn't leave the girl alone. Moreover, he thinks he cannot climb his way down. Crawford then hands a piece of wood to Killian and guides him to hit anyone who tries to climb up. He tells Killian to keep his walkie-talkie on, stay away from the edge, and be quiet. As he turns to leave, Killian stops him and gives him a chain for luck. Crawford climbs down, and Killian returns to the treehouse. Elizabeth crawls towards Killian with injured feet, and they hear screams from afar. She claims that it's the hunters. Killian peeks through a hole in the floor and sees shadows moving. He calls Crawford through the walkie-talkie, but gets no response. The silence scares him, and he shouts Crawford's name, asking him to run. Elizabeth looks at him crying and asks why he is shouting, considering the kidnappers now know their location because of his shout. Killian realizes his stupidity and peeks through the floor again. He suggests going down and hiding in the woods as the kidnappers might have left. But Elizabeth shows him her bleeding feet, indicating that she can't walk, and tells him that she won't escape without taking her brother. As they are talking, a creaking sound is heard. Elizabeth assumes it is coming from a branch about 10 feet down. They hear thumping sounds and hide themselves, realizing someone is coming up. A scary man climbs up, but he doesn't see anything due to the dark. As soon as he leaves, a girl's voice comes through the walkie-talkie, asking for Crawford. Elizabeth instantly holds the walkie to prevent gaining the attention of the man again. Killian takes the walkie and tells Ariel that Crawford isn't here. Fireworks start in the sky, and Killian tells her to escape since the woods are unsafe. Ariel takes it as a joke, and another girl, Betty, speaks to Killian. Killian informs them that Crawford went out to call the cops. He asks them to escape as soon as possible. However, screams come through the walkie-talkie, and Killian realizes the hunters have attacked them. A crying Ariel tells Killian they killed Betty and attacked another friend, Madison. She adds that she's hiding behind a tree, and they won't be able to spot her. Elizabeth asks Killian to inquire from Ariel if she saw Crawford's bike on her way to the woods. Ariel replies that she did not, and Elizabeth concludes that Crawford has escaped safely. As Ariel cries loudly, Killian instructs her to be quiet, but she doesn't listen, and the hunter spots her. Killian shouts at her to run, but to no avail. Complete silence surrounds them as the hunter kills her, and a horrible voice calls Killian's name over the walkie. He throws it away and hides in the dark. As thunder crashes, Elizabeth asks Killian to help pull out the thorns in her feet, and they wait for the thunder before Killian pulls out the thorn so that no one can hear her when she screams in pain. Once done with the thorns, they both decide to take a rest. As sleep overcomes Killian, he sees his father in a dream teaching him how to use a knife. His father was in the armed forces and gave him the chain which he gave to Crawford. Moreover, he was strong and wanted Killian to be strong as well. The following morning, Killian wakes up and sees Elizabeth bandaging her foot. She tells him these hunters know where they are as one keeps an eye on Killian and Elizabeth from behind a tree, while the other two move back and forth. She tells Killian that maybe they cannot climb except for the smallest one of them. Killian notices a smell coming as they talk, and Elizabeth assumes it is the scent of burning leaves. Killian infers that someone might be in the woods and they should check who it is. Elizabeth, however, tells him he cannot know who's out there just by sitting inside, so they'll have to climb up the tree to check if anyone's nearby. So Killian starts to climb, but loud, scary voices call out his name, so he holds onto the tree and makes himself believe that he can't hear them. He resumes the climb and feels something wet on his forehead. Upon touching it, he finds blood on his fingers. Killian suddenly looks upwards and spots a dead kid hanging from the tree. This terrifies Killian, and he loses his balance, making him fall. However, he luckily holds onto a branch and saves himself. Slowly gathering his courage, Killian goes to the top of the tree and sees that the smoke is thick from afar. He starts to make his way down, and once inside, he informs Elizabeth about the smoke. He looks at her and notices tears in her eyes. He asks her why she is crying, and she takes him outside, showing him the dead bodies of his friends hanging from the trees. Killian starts crying, and Elizabeth claims the monsters are playing with them. In grief and aggression, Killian shouts at them to finish what they have begun, and the monsters throw rocks at them. Killian, alongside Elizabeth, runs back inside, and the attack stops after a while. Later at night, Elizabeth starts to search Killian's bag to find anything that can be a light source so that the monsters can think they are inside. Killian gives her some candles, and she kisses his cheek in return, thanking him for saving her life. She tells him that his father must be proud of him, making Killian wonder how she knows about his father. She tells him that she heard him while he was sleeping. Killian tells her it was just a dream, but Elizabeth says that it is through dreams that the dead can talk to us, and they are usually better than real. She assures him that they'll make it out alive, and starts to create something out of candles. Later, as she finishes, they look at treehouse covered in candlelight and humanoid shadows. They plan to use these shadows to deceive the monsters and escape from the treehouse. At night, they leave the treehouse and start walking in the woods. However, Elizabeth's feet give up, and she sits by a tree for rest. Killian starts to encourage her to move while taking some steps back. Elizabeth suddenly shouts at him to be careful, and Killian hurriedly looks down. He notices metal thorns stuck in the ground and steps away. Knowing that they might be everywhere, Elizabeth decides to stay for the night and walk in the morning. Killian suggests using the moonlight and walking out, as the hunters can't spot them at night. Elizabeth says these thorns are closely placed, and moonlight won't help. They hear eerie sounds, and Killian sits with Elizabeth. He dozes off beside her and dreams about his father again. Killian sees the time when his father returned from war, and he took his father's gun to look at it. His father got so angry that he dunked Crawford's face in water as a punishment because he thought Crawford had his rifle. Moreover, when her mother stepped in to stop him, his father hit her, pushing her aside. Killian wakes up scared, so Elizabeth asks if he's okay, and he narrates his dream. He tells her that his father always blamed Crawford and punished him for something Killian did. But Crawford never said a word against Killian. He tells her he feels terrible, but Elizabeth tells him not to feel guilty. She tells him that having little brothers is like that, and she claims she can even die for a brother. Both of them start to cry, and Elizabeth makes Bob promise her that he'll find Bob and will make the ones who took him pay for what they did. Elizabeth rests her head on Killian's shoulder, and they doze off. The next day, Killian looks in front of him and finds the house from where the smoke was rising earlier. He rejoices and tries to wake up Elizabeth, who does not respond. After multiple tries, Killian realizes that her blood sugar level has fallen, and she's not sleeping but somewhat unconscious. He picks her up and carries her to the house, shouting for help, but no one answers. Killian opens the door and enters, only to find the house empty. He lies Elizabeth on a sofa and looks for something edible to bring her consciousness back. Killian then fills a glass with water and tries to put it in her mouth. However, Elizabeth coughs and starts to shake furiously. He puts some chocolate in her mouth, and she slowly wakes up. Elizabeth starts to cry and asks where they are, so Killian calms her down and tells her he carried her to the house. He then looks around and finds family portraits of 3 sons and a mother. While he's observing, Elizabeth asks him to find a telephone and contact someone. He searches and spots one near the glass back door. Killian begins to dial a number but looks outside through the door. The receiver falls from his hand, and he moves out. Killian finds a wooden hut outside, and upon exploring he finds burnt meat hanging inside. In the house, Elizabeth gets up and searches for something to balance her sugar. She finds rotten apples and feeds on them while calling out for Killian. Elizabeth notices him outside and starts to search the house on her own. She keeps walking and enters a room where a rotting dead body is lying on a bed with a glass and some cash lying on the floor near her. Elizabeth pukes due to the smell coming out of the body. In the backyard, Killian emerges from the hut and notices a burnt human body on a cross. But before he can go near, he sees 3 men approaching, one riding Crawford's bike while the remaining on their foot. Killian quickly runs to the hut and hides himself inside. Elizabeth also notices them back at the house and locks all the doors from inside. They come near the house and knock on the doors. Elizabeth locks herself in another room and starts looking around. She finds multiple pictures lying here and there of people that the hunters have killed. In the backyard, one of the men enters the hut to pick up his shotgun, and as he leaves, a terrified Killian comes outside. He looks at the burned body on the cross, and upon going near, he finds his father's chain on the ground. He realizes that the body on the cross is of Crawford and starts to cry. Back at the house, Elizabeth looks at the Polaroids of Crawford on the cross, Bob with the mouth cut open, lying dead between 2 hunters and other victims. She suddenly realizes that someone has come inside the house and hides herself behind a curtain. 2 guys come inside to check and leave without noticing her. In the meantime, Killian starts to walk away, but the guys spot him. One of them is about to shoot him, but Elizabeth comes from behind and attacks the one with the gun. One of the hunters shoots, and the bullet slightly pierces Killian's head. Elizabeth shouts at Killian to run. 2 hunters run after him while the one behind punches Elizabeth in the face, and she faints. The hunter leaves Elizabeth and runs after Killian, following the footsteps of other hunters. After a lot of running, one of them catches Killian and drowns his face in the water. Killian gets a flashback of his father doing the same thing to Crawford, and he hits the hunter in the face with his elbow. The hunter falls on his back, and Killian takes out his knife. He shoves the knife through the hunter's face, killing him immediately. The hunter who attacked Elizabeth comes and spots Killian. Killian pulls the knife from the dead hunter's face, throws it precisely as his father taught, and the blade falls right into his heart. The hunter takes out the knife and starts to walk after Killian. However, Killian runs away fast and suddenly bumps into Elizabeth. He covers her with a jacket, and they notice the third hunter coming through the woods. The duo rushes towards the road. However, a truck coming in at a very high speed spots Elizabeth and Killian. The driver changes his direction and his car crashes into a tree. Killian opens the car door and takes the driver's gun hurriedly. He then shoots at the third hunter, who's coming in their direction. The third hunter falls to the ground dead. Later, as Killian and Elizabeth sit together, crying over their dead siblings, they suddenly notice the truck. Killian stands up and moves to the truck. Seeing guns at the back, he calls Elizabeth to check them. She gets up, and after analyzing, she says that the guns indicate one of the hunters is still alive, and both pick up a weapon. The movie ends with them sharing a kiss and determined to kill whoever is responsible for Bob and Crawford's death.